Hello and welcome to another episode of Catholic Chapter House Video. I am your host, David Gilbert, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about sin and being an accessory to sin. So I'm going to talk about what is sin and ways of being an accessory to another person's sin. So before we start off, we should lay some definitions. So what is sin? So the Catholic Church and the Catechism defines sin as: sin is an offense against reason, truth, and right conscience. It is failure in genuine love for God and neighbor, caused by a perverse attachment to certain goods. It wounds the nature of man and injures human solidarity. It has been defined as utterance, a deed, or a desire contrary to the eternal law. It goes on to say, sin is an offense against God. Sin sets itself against God's love for us and turns our hearts away from it. Like the first sin, it is disobedience, a revolt against God through the will to become like God's, knowing and determining good and evil. Sin is thus love of oneself, even to contempt of God. In this proud self-exaltation, sin is diametrically opposed to the obedience of Jesus, which achieves our salvation. So, that's what sin is. Now, what does sin look like? So the Catechism then goes on even more. It is precisely in the passion, when the mercy of Christ is about to vanquish it, that sin mostly clearly manifests its violence and its many forms: unbelief, murderous hatred, shunning, mockery, cowardice, cruelty, and betrayal and denial. So, how does God view sin? This is how God views sin. Now, in Scriptures, Psalm 5, verse 4 to 6 says, "You are not a God who takes pleasure in evil. With you the wicked cannot dwell. The arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all who do wrong. You destroy those who tell lies. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men the Lord abhors." And in Habakkuk, chapter 1, verse 12, the prophet says of God, "Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong." So, if we want a close and personal relationship with God, we must make every effort to keep ourselves free from those things that God cannot stand and find repulsive, i.e. sin, and remain in His grace. And the Apostle John makes it very clear in 1 John 5 to 6, God is light. In Him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with Him, yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live by the truth. Again in John 3, chapter 5 to 6, he states, "But you know that He appeared so that He might take away our sins, and in Him is no sin. No one who lives in Him keeps on sinning. No one who continues to sin has either seen Him or has known Him." Let me repeat that. No one who continues to sin has either seen Him or knows Him. So if we desire to be in the presence of God, if we desire to remain in a state of grace with Him, we must make every effort to stay away from everything that makes us repulsive to Him, i.e. sin. Now, this topic is just on sin, so obviously there's God's mercy, but this is what today's topic is. So we'll get into God's mercy in a later episode. So I don't want you to think like there's no hope or anything like that. So I just want to carry on. So I bring this up because I think it's important to understand how serious sin is and the effect that our sin has on our relationship with God, and how repulsive sin is to Him. So we've lost this sense of of what sin really is in society. Like nowadays, sin's not a big deal. Even sin is celebrated in songs, in parades, in the culture. And this is a great deception from the devil, that he has minimized the severity of sin and what that sin does to us and our relationship with God, but also to how God views sin. Because a lot of things, oh, well, God's going to forgive me, whatever, and you just do it anyways. Well, if we truly love God, do we even want to sin even the smallest sin if we knew what effect it has on Him? So, now, I want to bring up something that we might not be aware that we're sinning. I was with a friend the other weekend, and we were just doing some Catholic trivia while we were waiting. You know, one of the things that I found was the 9 ways of being an accessory to another sin. So you can find it in some old prayer books, or also taken from the 1962 Roman Missal. It's under the heading "The Most Necessary Prayers." And the list is commonly used as a part of a Catholic's examination of conscience before they go up to receive the Eucharist. This list is simple, but it's necessary as a guiding post for those who are striving to live a Christ-centered life, a Christ-like life. And so I'm going to just list out the 9 ways that you can be an accessory to another person's sin, and then I'm just going to get into it a little bit deeper. So the first one is we can be an accessory to another sin by counsel, by command, by consent, by provocation, by praise or flattery, by concealment, by partaking, by silence, and by defense of the ill done. So, for counsel, you know, we give advice or guide someone towards a sin, then we are culpable for that sin just as much as that person who did it. By command, I think that's pretty easy, self-explanatory. Same with by consent. That's pretty self-explanatory. By provocation. So, for example, you provoke your spouse or someone else to get really, really angry. Or you provoke a person to the point where they commit suicide or something. That you are just as responsible for that sin because you are the one who provoked that sin from happening. So you're an accessory to that sin. By praise or flattery. So you brag or praise someone for the sin that they've done. I know, for example, when I was playing hockey, the dressing room talk, before and after games, you use your imagination. But anyways, guys would be bragging about their engagements with women, and how they've treated them, and just the encouragement, the flattery, the praise for these acts that these guys did. You're by doing that, you then become an accessory to that sin as well. So you got to be careful about praising or flattering people in their sin. Another one is by concealment. So you hide the sin of someone else's. Whether that's you're a sibling or a friend, and your friend stole something and you didn't you concealed it, you didn't tell anyone. You're just as culpable for that sin. By partaking in the sin, that's obvious. Next one is by defense of the ill done. So, for example, you defend a woman for having an abortion because it's her choice. Or you defend the use of contraception for a couple for some reason. These are ways that you then become an accessory to that sin because you're defending that sin to continue to perpetuate. And this is the biggest one. So, silence. I had this as it's the second last one in the list that I initially read to you, but I wanted to keep it to the end because I think this is the one that a lot of us struggle with the most, and I think it's the one that we don't think about at all. And so I wanted to leave this to the end. And so it's by silence that we become an accessory to sin. This is the biggest one. We're so concerned about how people will think about us or how they would feel, or you don't want to cause a scene, so we're quiet about the sins taking place so that, we can keep the peace. So, for example, a big one I know is, with family. I mean, everyone knows pretty much what family members are doing, and knowing that a sibling or a child is engaging in premarital sex, or your children or sibling is cohabitating, and instead of admonishing the sinner, which is actually a spiritual work of mercy, we choose to keep silent, and we choose to be we choose to pretend to be ignorant of the situation, or you're concerned, you might have suspicions that these sins are taking place, but you just keep silent. You don't want to know. It's almost like a willful ignorance. This is a huge one, and I think a lot of us are going to be answerable to God for the sin of being silent, and a lot of us don't realize that we're being an accessory to sin by our silence. We are called to be light of Christ, and the light dispels the darkness and reveals the ugliness that's being hidden in the darkness, and that's what we are called to do, not out of judgment, but out of love, fraternal correction. And so, I just want to, ask you guys to pray that you may have the courage not to be silent. Pray that we do not become accessories to sin. And we pray that we may live a life that is pleasing to the Lord. And if you're struggling with any of these 9 things, especially being silent, I feel for you. I've been in that situation, and I find myself in that situation a lot of times. So please pray for me that I may have the courage to not be silent. And please pray for me that I may not be an accessory to sin. And I'll be praying for you for the exact same thing. So please pray for, and actually, I almost forgot. I want to give you some words of encouragement from our Lord Jesus Christ before I go. It's in John chapter 8, verse 11. I love the Gospel of John. It's my favorite Gospel. And Christ says, "Go, and from now on, sin no more." And those were his words to Mary Magdalene, Saint Mary Magdalene. And so I ask you to go, and from now on, sin no more. And if you have issues with sin, Mary Magdalene's an excellent intercessor, and these were the words said to her. And I'm sure she will help you out to get the grace as she did, so that you may be pleasing to God. Anyways, that's it for today. Please pray for me. I'll definitely be praying for you. And remember, prepare yourself spiritually, be bold, trust in the Lord, and take action. God bless you all. Bye.